Hello and good morning. Welcome to the morning endurance call. I'm Keith Erwood. We had a little glitch, so I'm going to jump right in today. Today's topic is this: preparedness without panic. This matters because one of the biggest reasons some leaders avoid the preparedness conversations is that they associate preparedness with fear, negativity, or worst case thinking. They'll hear terms like risk, disruption, crisis, downtime, failure, recovery, impact, and vulnerability. And sometimes their reaction is, I do not want to focus on all of that. I do not want to lead from fear. Or I do not want the team operating in panic mode. And I do not want to create anxiety in the business. That reaction is understandable. But it also reveals a very important misunderstanding, because preparedness is not panic. Preparedness is clarity. Preparedness is discipline, it's perspective, and preparedness is structure, and preparedness is leadership. And that is the distinction. It's one of the reasons why I'll often say strong preparedness should create more confidence, not more fear. That is the point. Because panic and preparedness are not the same thing at all. Panic is reactive, while preparedness is deliberate. And panic is emotional without structure, where preparedness is thoughtful with structure. Panic loses clarity, while preparedness builds clarity. And panic amplifies confusion, while preparedness reduces confusion. Panic makes people feel less capable, while preparedness helps people become more capable. That is why this topic matters so much. Because when leaders confuse preparedness with panic, they often avoid exactly the work that would make the business steadier, more confident, and less fragile when disruption actually occurs. That is the irony. The avoidance of preparedness often increases vulnerability, not because the leaders are careless, but because they do not want to create fear, so they avoid creating clarity. And clarity is exactly what the business needs. Now, let's make this a little more practical. What does preparedness without panic actually look like? First, it looks like honest thinking without emotional exaggeration. Prepared leaders are willing to ask, what could disrupt us? What matters most? And what are we depending on? What would the consequence be? And where are we more fragile than we want to be? And what would we do if this happened? Those are serious questions. But asking serious questions does not mean becoming alarmist. It means being disciplined enough to look at reality without dramatizing it. Second, preparedness without panic looks like structured action. Panic tends to produce scattered reactions, while preparedness produces deliberate next steps. Such as, instead of saying, this is overwhelming, prepared leaders will say, let's identify what matters most first. Instead of saying, there are too many risks, prepared leaders will say, let's focus on the ones with the most meaningful consequences. And instead of saying, this could become a disaster, prepared leadership will say, what capabilities would help us handle this better? That is a very different posture. Third, preparedness without panic looks like confidence rooted in understanding. A lot of false confidence comes from avoidance. And people will say, we'll be fine, we'll deal with it, I'm sure we can work it out. That may feel calm on the surface, but it is often unsupported calm. Preparedness builds a stronger kind of confidence, not confidence based on wishful thinking, but confidence based on clear priorities, better analysis, stronger recovery thinking, and more disciplined leadership, and more realistic assumptions. That kind of confidence, it's much more durable. Fourth, preparedness without panic looks like leaders setting emotional tone wisely. Leaders do not need to frighten people into preparedness, and they do not need to pretend there are no risks either. Strong leaders can say, we take risks seriously and we are approaching it thoughtfully. We are not preparing because we are panicked, we're preparing because we're responsible. And we're not looking for fear, we are looking for clarity. We're not trying to predict every problem, we're trying to build the ability to handle problems better. That kind of language matters because it helps the organization understand preparedness as a strength and not a burden. Now, one of the reasons preparedness sometimes gets communicated poorly is because too much of the conversation gets framed around catastrophes. Everything sounds like what could go wrong, how bad it could be, what might fail, what the losses could be. And while those realities do matter, if that is the only framing, people can begin to experience preparedness as emotionally heavy instead of strategically useful. That is why leaders need balance. Preparedness should acknowledge risk honestly, but it should also emphasize capability, choice, control, clarity, resilience and continuity, and recovery and leadership strength. Because preparedness is not just about what can happen to you, it is about what you can build before it happens. That is empowering. This is why I often think preparedness should be framed as a business advantage, not just a defensive measure, a leadership advantage. Why? Because a prepared business tends to think more clearly, recover faster, communicate better, make better decisions, and protect value more effectively, while they operate with less avoidable confusion when the pressure hits. That's not panic, that is strength. Now let's talk about what panic actually looks like in business, because it will help highlight the difference. Panic often shows up or looks like rushing without priorities, escalating without structure, communicating emotionally instead of clearly, treating every issue as equally urgent, and making decisions from fear instead of analysis, and reacting to uncertainty by amplifying it. Preparedness does the exact opposite. Preparedness says, let's clarify what matters. Let's understand the consequences. And let's define ownership. Let's think through options. Let's prepare for likely pressure points. Let's build capability. And let's test what we are assuming. And let's improve before the next disruption forces the lesson upon us. That is a completely different mindset. And that is why preparedness without panic is so important for leaders. Because if preparedness is always framed emotionally, people will resist it. But if it's framed as disciplined business leadership, people are much more likely to engage with it productively. Now, I want to make an important point here. Preparedness without panic does not mean complacency. It does not mean minimizing real risk or avoiding hard truths. It does not mean becoming soft in the face of serious consequences. What it does mean is approaching serious realities with steadiness rather than emotional distortion. That is leadership. It is saying, yes, disruption is possible. Yes, some consequences could be serious. And yes, we're going to approach that with clear thinking, disciplined action, and purposeful preparation. That is a much stronger message. This also matters for culture, because culture is strategy for breakfast. A business that treats preparedness as fear-based may struggle to sustain engagement with it People will get fatigued, they tune out, they'll completely avoid the topic. They associate it with stress instead of strength. But a business that treats preparedness as part of a professional discipline tends to build healthier, long-term engagement. People begin to understand this is how we protect what matters. This is how we reduce avoidable losses. And this is how we support one another under pressure. This is how we lead responsibly. And this is how we build an enduring business. That cultural shift is powerful. And it connects closely to risk assessment, business impact analysis, recovery strategy, continuity, and crisis leadership. All of these areas can be handled with either panic or discipline. A weak posture will say, there are too many things that can go wrong. But a strong posture says, let's identify which issues matter most and prepare intelligently. A weak posture says, this feels overwhelming. But a strong posture says, let's build clarity one layer at a time. That is the major difference. And it connects directly to endurance. Because endurance in business is the ability to continue operating, make sound decisions, recover intelligently, and keep moving forward under pressure over time. Preparedness supports endurance when it builds clarity, confidence, capability, and steadiness before the disruption occurs. But panic weakens endurance because it scatters thinking and increases instability. But preparedness without panic strengthens endurance because it helps the business face reality without losing its footing. That is what enduring businesses do. They do not avoid the truth. They do not dramatize the truth. They prepare around the truth. That is a much stronger leadership posture. So here's a very practical leadership question. When your organization talks about risk and preparedness, does the conversation create more clarity and confidence or more tension and avoidance? That is a powerful question. You can also ask questions such as, are we framing preparedness as a responsibility or a fear? Do our people understand the purpose behind this work? Are we helping leaders feel more capable or just more concerned? Do our conversations build capability or does it mostly elevate anxiety? Are we approaching disruption with discipline or emotional overreaction? Those are strong questions because they help leaders shape the culture around preparedness in a healthier and more effective way. And that is the point. So here's today's leadership takeaway. Preparedness without panic means facing risk honestly, building capability deliberately, and leading with clarity instead of fear. Strong preparedness should strengthen confidence, discipline, and readiness, not create emotional instability. And that is the distinction. So here's today's question for you. Does your current approach to preparedness make your business feel more capable and clear or more tense and avoidant? That is an important question because the answer often tells you whether preparedness is being framed in a way that truly strengthens the business. Thank you for joining me today on the Morning Endurance Call. Think clearly, prepare deliberately, and lead with endurance.